Hello, good morning everyone. My name is Alfian.
And my name is Marchi, Anggi, Aritonang.
So today we want to discuss about the Telltale's Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. And why we choose this short story? Because
this story is full of mystery, and we are curious about to analyze the story using new criticism.
And I want to tell you about the summary of the Telltale's Heart. An unnamed narrator opens the story by addressing the reader and claiming that he is nervous but not mad. He says that he is going to tell a story in which he will defend his sanity yet confess to having killed an old man. His motivation was neither passion nor desire for money, but rather a fear of the man's pale blue eye. Again, he insists that he is not crazy because his cool and measured actions. Tough criminals are not those of a madman. Every night, he went to the old man's apartment and secretly observed the man sleeping. In the morning, he would behave as if everything were normal. After a week of his activity, the narrator decides somewhat randomly that the time is right to kill the old man. And when the narrator arrives late on the 8th night, though the old man wakes up and cries out. The narrator remains still, stalking the old man as he sits awake and frightened. The narrator understands how frightened the old man is. Having also experienced the lonely terrors of the night, soon the narrator hears a dull pounding that he interprets as the old man's terrified heartbeat. Worried that a neighbor might hear the loud thumping, he attacks and kills the old man. He then dismembers the body and hides the pieces below the floorboards in the bedroom. He is careful not to leave even a drop of blood on the floor. As he finishes his job, a clock strikes the hour of 4. At the same time, the narrator hears a knock at the street door. The police have arrived, having been called by a neighbor who heard the old man shriek. The narrator is careful to be chatty and to appear normal. He leads the officers all over the house without acting suspiciously. At the height of his bravado, he even brings them into the old man's bedroom to sit down and talk at the scene of the crime. The policemen do not suspect a thing. The narrator is comfortable until he starts to hear a loud thumping sound. He recognizes the loud sound as the heart of the old man pounding away beneath the floorboards. He panics, believing that the policeman must also hear the soundman, and now he squeals. Driven mad by the idea that they are mocking his agony with their pleasant chatter, he confesses to the crime and shrieks at the man to rip up the floorboard.
And I want to explain to you about what is new criticism. New criticism is actually a formalist movement in literary theory that dominated American literary criticism in the middle decades of the 20th century. It emphasized close reading, particularly of poetry, to discover how a work of literature functioned as a self-contained, self-referential, and aesthetic object.
And new criticism itself is where the reader's response and biography of the author is ignored. We just analyze the text itself. Like, for example, we can analyze the setting, we can analyze the plot, we can analyze the moral value, and etc. etc.
I agree. New criticism believed that the structure and the meaning of the text were intimately connected and should not be analyzed separately. In order to bring the focus of the literary studies back to analysis of the text, they aim to exclude the reader's response, the author's intention, historical and cultural context, and moralistic bias from their analysis. Reading a passage of prose or poetry in new critical style requires careful, exacting scrutiny of the passage itself. Formal elements such as rhyme, matter, setting, characterization, and plot were used to identify the theme of the text. In addition to the theme, new criticism also looked for paradox, ambiguity, and tension to help establish the single best and most unified interpretation of the text. Although the new criticism is no longer a dominant theoretical model in American universities, some of its methods, like close reading, are still fundamental tools of literary criticism, underpinning a number of subsequent theoretic approaches to literature, including post-structuralism, deconstruction theory, and reader response theory.
So let's just analyze the the short story itself. First, I want to talk about the plot. The plot is about a man who wants to murder another man but doesn't want to be caught and punished. You have to assume that he intends to commit a perfect crime. Even though the narrator doesn't say as much until after he commits it and hides the body under the floorboards, the narrator spends a great deal of time talking about how he looks on the old man every night and focuses on details leading up to the actual murder. But the important feature is that he wants to get by with a murder. We will tend to suspect that he is a dependent on this older man and has something to gain from killing him. The victim is probably not his father, but he could be the narrator's uncle, and the narrator might stand to inherit the house and some money. Otherwise, it is hard to account for why he would be living with this older man. The narrator's real motive for committing the murder may have nothing to do with the old man's eye and everything to do with wanting his property. This is essentially a perfect crime story in which the perpetrator nearly gets away with it, except for one slip-up. In such stories, the reader is in the perpetrator's point of view and therefore identifies with him to some extent. When the narrator breaks down and confesses, the reader also must share the feeling of being exposed and arrested. The fact that the narrator is insane is incidental. Even insane murderers usually have practical motivations.
So the second thing that we want to talk about is the setting of the story that takes place in the sitting room of a house at night. The narrator is a servant of some sort who takes care of the old man, but is haunted by the man's evil eye. He plans to kill the man and thereby effectively rid himself of the eye. The bulk of the story tells of the deed, however, which takes place at the door to the old man's bedroom. The night is dark and still, and suspense is built because of darkness. The night is quiet, again to leaving more suspense and adding to the fear of the old man when he hears the lantern make a noise. Then, when the police arrive, the setting shifts to the very room in which the narrator has placed the old man's cracked body under the floorboards. The setting is crucial here because the narrator begins to think that he can hear the heart of the old man beating beneath the floor as he tries to calmly serve tea to the officers.
And I want to add something about the setting. However, for the narrator's tale, it is also possible to imagine that the story is set in an interrogation room or jail cell, as it is clear from telling that the events have already passed and the murderer has confessed his deeds. Perhaps he is in an institution and is relating his tale to anyone who will listen. He needs the listener to validate his actions or to free him for the guilt he now carries for his deeds. And a final setting is in the mind of the narrator. The landscape of his passage is clouded with first justification for his action. The killing the old man to get rid of the eye. And then a sense of the growing panic that fails him and leads to his confession.
And next, we will talk about the character. Although there are only two characters involved in the story, an old man and the younger man who lives with him, it is really about a single character. An examination of the nature of the narrator's obsession show how the author sets up the story about a split physique. The narrator insists that he loves the old man, has no personal animosity toward him, doesn't want his money, and has not been injured by him. Instead, he says he wished to kill the old man because of his eye. Although there is no way to understand this obsession, the reader must determine the method and the meaning of the madness. For the author, there is no such thing as meaningless madness in fiction. It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. To understand what the old man's eye means to the narrator, it is necessary to examine the relevance of the other themes and ideas. Besides the themes of the eye, there are two primary motives: the idea of a time and the identification of the narrator with the old man. The narrator says at various points in the story that he knows what the old man is feeling and he lies alone in bed, for he himself has felt the same things. He says that the moan the old man makes does not come from the pain of grief, but from moral terror that rises from the bottom of the soul, overcharged with awe.
So I want to tell you about the character itself. First, the narrator. The narrator of the tale tells hard, recounts his murder of an old man. Since he tells his story in first person, the reader cannot determine how much of what he says is true. Thus, he is an unreliable narrator. Thought, he repeatedly states that he is insane. The reader suspects otherwise from his bizarre reasoning, behavior, and speech. He speaks with trepidation from the famous first line of the story. True, nervous, very dreadful nervous. I had been and am, but why will you say that I am mad? And the reader soon realizes through jolting description of the narrator's state of mind that the protagonist has in fact descended into madness. And the narrator claims that he loves the old man and has no motive for the murder other than growing dislike of a cloudy film over one of the old man's eyes, who, the author, effectively conveys panic in the narrator's voice, and the reader senses uneasiness and growing tension in the narrative. Through the first-person narrative of a madman, who effectively creates a gothic tale full of horror and psychological torment, a style he termed Arabesque. And the second is an old man. The old man is known to readers only through the narration of the insane protagonist. According to the narrator, the old man had never done anything to warrant his murder. However, the old man's cloudy, pale blue eye bothers the narrator tremendously. The narrator believes.
The next thing that we want to talk is symbolism, imagery, and allegory. The first symbolism in the story is the old man's eye is blue, but symbolically it means that the character have issues with their inner vision, what's commonly known as one's outlook on the world. They are stuck, everything is obscured for them. Our reading of the story is likewise filtered through the hazy eye, causing at least some confusion and frustration with the text. The eye also does some pretty weird stuff. It seems dull and unseeing, yet it has strange power. It makes the narrator blood run cold. It chills the very marrows in his bones. After hiding the old man's body, the narrator replaced the board so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his eye, could have detected anything wrong. Interesting. That statement implies that at some point the eye could see hidden or secret thing. The eye also seemed to have a bodyguard. A bodyguard, his heart. When the narrator trains the beam on the open eye, it causes the heart to beat an alert. When the policemen are there, the heart beats loudly to alert the cops, so the eye can again see and be seen. The narrator is fixated on the vulture eye aspect of the old man's eye. He brings it up 3 times. Vultures prey on the sick or dead, and they gorge themselves to the point of stupor. Whether or not the old man is vulture-like person, we can't know. But that is what he symbolized to the narrator. If vultures prey on the dead and almost dead, and the narrator is afraid of the vulture eye, does this mean that the narrator is dead or almost dead?
So next I want to talk about the bed and the bedroom. The bed in the telltale's heart symbolizes the opposite of what beds and bedrooms should be about. The narrator violates all bedroom etiquette by exploiting the vulnerability of one who is sleeping. We are perhaps most vulnerable in bed, and we sleep well when we feel safe in our bedrooms. Who turns the symbol of the bed on its head? The narrator used the bed as weapon to snuff out the old man, and since the bed is the murder weapon, it's logical that the bedroom is the burial place creepy. So after we analyze the bed and the bedrooms, I want to analyze the watch. The narrator mentions a watch 4 times in the story. A watch is a visual and auditory representation of time. The watch watches time and tells tales of time. Time can also be said to be watching death, up ahead in the distance. Each tick of the watch symbolizes a movement closer to the inevitable death that all humans face. Who presents this subtly in the story's first mention of the watch? A watch minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. This, of course, is on the 8th night. Here the narrator compares himself to a watch watching the old man's death. The narrator steals time's power as an agent of death. The narrator literally controls the time of the old man's death. He is a walking death watch. This metaphor or wordplay becomes more explicit in the second mention of the time in the story. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. This is a mystifying line until we know that death watches are kind of beetle. Beetles live inside walls and bang their heads on side walls to attract mates. Who might not have known this was a mating call and was likely referring only to the popular belief that the banging is a countdown to someone's death. Then again, maybe he didn't know, intentionally or not. This odd moment in the novel juxtaposed sex and death in a way that would have made Sigmund Freud proud. In Beyond the Pleasure Principle, Freud theorized that death and sex are intimately and intricately intertwined.